Hey everybody, Scott Hogan coming at you. Thank you so much for tuning in. And today we're going to talk about wedges. You were asking for how do we talk about or what are we looking for with angle of attack in wedges. So we're going to do that today. And I'm going to be honest, this one's a little bit of a topic that can go a million different directions. So we're kind of putting it into just a couple things I think you should think about. But you know, at the end of the day, with wedges, it's more about being creative and thinking of what you can do. And if you start understanding a few concepts, I'll have a couple of the specialty things to think about at the end, where you can start trying to add some of the shots you're now seeing on, the tours on a regular basis. Maybe we can start adding those into our arsenal. Before we do that though, make sure you know what, don't even click it. Don't hit it, don't press it. Make sure you smash that like button. We're going to get into the video today and you don't want to miss out on what's going on as the season starts. We're going to be talking about more getting you ready for your games in this season that is hopefully coming soon. All right, so let's get into the simulator bay. Let's start talking about wedge angle of attack. All right, everybody, let's talk some wedge stuff here with our angle of attack. So we're going into angle of attack with a wedge. It's very important to start understanding what's going on with your wedges and how this works, okay? So one of the big things that and one of the big reasons we left this for the end with wedges is there is so much that you can do with a wedge, and there is not really a standard angle of attack. It can depend on the shot you're hitting and what's going on. I think the biggest thing is for you to start kind of understanding what you do and try to apply that into the situation that you are in. So I'm going to give you an example here. Right here, I hit a shot where I only hit it 13 yards, and you can see my angle of attack is 12 down. Now I do see it look a little bit more where the angle of attack appears more down even when you're hitting these little baby chips. And the reason for that is, even though it's a small swing, what happens is, one, the ball is usually more back in our stance. When we move it back, we're going to hit more down on it. The other thing that happens is usually when we're making this small stroke, okay, by the time we hit the ball, what happens is our hands kind of lead, and that creates this little downward motion. And that's why I typically see a high angle of attack of about a -11, -12. Is it correct? You know, again, I think you're better off trying out a bunch of shots. If you feel like, hey, I need to hit this shot and get more down on it, I think you can do that. I think the biggest thing here is to learn what you're doing with the shot. Now, for me personally, I would rather see somebody on a little baby chip like this hit down on the ball and make good contact. And so I'd rather see it get up where you're seeing a pretty high negative number for this, okay? What I typically will see when it's not very good is something like that, where they're flipping at this really short shot, and we got a -2.7. That's gonna not leave a ton of room for error on a short shot like this, okay? Now, when we get to a longer shot, let's say we're gonna go to 50 yards. Now we're talking in a different scenario. You're gonna be making a bigger swing. You've got more time to do things within your swing. This is where I like to see the angle of attack drop. The goal is I want to get it to around -5 if we can. Okay? If I can get it around -5, we're usually in really good shape. Okay, so let's hit one. Going for about 50 yards. 48, and I was at -6.3. Not bad. And here's why I like to see a more shallow angle of attack. When you're coming down and you're hitting a wedge shot, again, on a super short one where you're not making a real big swing, all right, I like to see you hit down on it a little bit because I don't want you to brush the grass. I think you're going to be able to make contact with the ball first, and you're going to be able to hit a pretty good shot. You're not making that big of a swing. But when we get to a bigger swing, as we start to try to hit down on it more, you're going to have to be really accurate with where you're hitting the bottom here, where you're hitting the ball, because if you don't and you're hitting really down on it, you're going to take a massive divot, and if you don't catch the ball first, you're going to chunk it. So what I like to think about when I'm hitting a little bit longer shot, okay, is how can I get my angle of attack down? I hit that one a little too hard, but there's -6. And the way I try to do that is, if you saw our chunking shots video, I try to think about working the club like I'm going to hit a draw, which is feeling my hands work really around my body and the club feeling very flat around my body, okay? And if I can do that, I can typically start bringing it down lower. And I'm going to be very consistent with that. You can see I hit up the one before this a little hard, but I'm going to start getting dialed in on how far I need to hit each shot, okay? So we like to be a little bit more shallow with the wedge because it gives us a bigger flat spot. You're not hammering down on it, and this club gets to come down to the ball, but the bottom of the arc is just flatter. So if you catch it a touch fat, you catch it a touch thin, you're still going to hit a pretty good shot, and we want as much room for air as we go. So when you're hitting a wedge that's, you know, getting up there in size of swing, now we want that angle of attack to start dropping and getting. Again, we kind of like under 5 if you can do it, but I think the bigger thing is trying to get it as consistent as you can and definitely get out of those double digits with this. All right, so let's talk about a couple of specialty scenarios that come up with wedges. Again, this starts opening up a black hole where we can talk about a lot of things, and things that I cover in this video, you might not see, or you might see different things while you're working with your unit. This is just because of what golf is. Golf is very much a game of variance and different things going on. So let's talk about one of the first things is, what should you do for a shot that's, let's say, in the rough, okay? How would that change your angle of attack? Why is this important to know? Well, one of the things that you need to be looking at is, all right, I'm going to hit a shot where I have to pick the club up more so I don't get stuck in the grass, okay? So in essence, it feels very much like you're chopping down on the ball, okay? Now that one I hit very good. I got the -10, so I definitely hit down on it. That's pretty high for me on this shot. So there we go. That's my feel of trying to hit down on it. But what happens sometimes is people will hit this shot and they will get even like a -2 or a -3 on their angle of attack. And what happens is sometimes, especially if you're opening up the club face, which I like to do, what happens is you actually hit a little bit behind the ball and you use the bounce of the club, and the club bounces back up into the ball. So your angle of attack that might be -10, -12, it's now gotten leveled off because you've used the bounce of the club, and you're going to get this read that shows, hey, I'm very, very level, okay? Now, you want to be careful with that. That's not a bad thing, but you have to be very aware of how you're striking the wedge, okay? That one I felt like I swung way down. I don't know if you could hear it, but I definitely hit the ground first, and my angle of attack for what felt like the same swing went way down, okay? It's -6 now. So that's something you have to be aware of when you're hitting these shots. This is actually something that got me in a lot of trouble, because when we see tour players, they try to hit these shots and they really are just like, when you see them hit it, they're hitting it and there's no dirt going anywhere, right? They just hit the ground. It almost like they didn't hit the ground at all. You see them chip off of greens and stuff, and you're like, man, look at that. Well, the big thing is you have to realize they are hitting the ground on most of the shots, but they're using the bounce, and so you can't think about trying to not hit the ground or barely brush the ground. You have to think about using your golf club correctly and getting the bounce part to work. So just something to think about as you're going through shots, because as you're hitting them, that one I hit very, very clean. Got the ball first, 9.7 down. It's just one of those things that you're going to see as you're trying to work on this. So I wanted to bring that up for people that are trying to hit, you know, some other shots and doing some things with their wedge and see what they can do. But I would definitely experiment with that a little bit and start trying to open your wedge up and hit behind it and see how that bounce works for you and see what you can get. So that's something that's pretty interesting to look at. All right, so I did want to talk about one shot, which is this like crazy spinner shot that you're seeing nowadays. And that, you know, you see all these pros playing it. It's like almost making the game unfair. These guys are hitting these shots off these fairway lies where they're hitting it and the ball just like 1 or 2 hops and stops. Let's talk a little bit about how that happens and what you could do to be able to maybe add this to your game or try to experiment with it. So what's going on in their swing is, we talked in the last video, which was you have spin loft on a wedge shot, all right? So spin lofts on every shot, but on a wedge shot, you're really looking at that and you're trying to get that to go as high as you can. There was a lot of talk before about maybe there was an optimal, you know, point where you would get spin. I think that's been debunked pretty much. So what we're trying to do is get that spin loft to go, you know, up a little bit. And what happens is, if you remember, spin loft is the angle of you hitting down on your angle of attack and the loft of the face. So what happens is players, they open the face of the club way up, okay? And then they just make a swing where they're just throwing the club down at the ball and they're making sure there's a ton of loft on the club as they go through. And if they make some decent contact, you're going to see that spin loft number go way up, okay? You can see I could probably get a little bit more down on that one. It's basically like trying to hit a little bit of a bunker shot, but now more than ever, I think you see players that are a little bit more wristy with these wedges, and something to really pay attention to as you go through. I like that one. As you go through and start thinking about, hey, I would love to add that shot to an arsenal. So something to watch for with these pros. Again, you're going to see them really hinge the golf club up, face wide open. They throw the club down at it, and they might hit the ground first. That's okay. Just something that you're going to want to look at and maybe add to your game. So something you can start looking for with your unit or with any of your launch monitors that give you an angle of attack. All right, so you can see there, again, kind of some things you have to think about. It's a little bit, you know, trial and error with wedges to start understanding, because, again, the unit is reading in a way that, based on the little shots you're doing, we're talking about such minute details. People will say, hey, that's kind of odd why I'm getting a read like that. Well, you have to start thinking through it and really kind of put a little bit of, you know, practicality and just imagining what's going on, and you're going to get to where these numbers are coming from. So just something to think about. If you're having, you know, issues, or you're thinking, hey, what should I do? I would highly recommend just Googling some numbers of pros and what they're doing, and you can find some stuff out there. But again, it's more about just learning what you do and what you can be consistent at. That's going to make you the best wedge player. So again, thanks everybody for tuning in. We've got more coming up. We will see you in the next video. Thanks again. And remember, if you haven't hit that subscribe button already, make sure you smash it. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next one.